Welcome back, everyone. The doctor is in. Today I'm talking again about my BattleTech writing over the last decade. In today's video, I'm talking about writing for Jihad: Final Reckoning. This was one of the final books detailing the Word of Blake Jihad storyline that took place in BattleTech. This detailed a lot of the political, industrial, and military aspects of the various powers, along with a lot of the final, or almost final, combat reports, and it had a string of scenarios. There was another book that followed this, which was Total Chaos. And that one had some interesting aspects to it. I wrote some material for Total Chaos, so I will be talking about that in a later video. This was something of a wrap-up book for the Jihad Hotspots series. So preceding this was Jihad Hotspots Terra, I believe, and this was Final Reckoning, so this was the capstone on the entire Jihad storyline in the Hotspots format. And what the Hotspots format used, for the most part, instead of factual, out-of-character, objective source book type writing, it had a lot of in-character, in-universe, subjective material. That is, instead of saying, this battle occurred on this date between this regiment and that regiment, it was written from the perspective of news reports, which didn't have the full story, so a lot of things were vague and sometimes left open to interpretation. Some things were disinformation that the in-character reporters took to be fact. It's one of these sort of fog of war type products. This is the first one of these that I worked on as a writer. I was, I believe, a playtester and maybe a fact checker on some of the earlier books in the series, but this was the first, and really, since it was the last one, the only one that I did any writing for. So let's go ahead and get to what I did for this book. There was an entire section called What Lies Beneath, written from the POV of the new Republic of the Sphere, as a report and update on the state of things with all the other factions in the game, from the deep periphery to the clans to the periphery to the inner sphere and the Republic itself. It's interesting, when I was looking through my old files for this, I found a set of files that apparently were cut from this book. I'll have to look to see if they appeared in any other published source or if they were simply abandoned, because originally I was not assigned to write all of the Draconis Combine. I was assigned to write the section that I'm showing here, but there was another section assigned to a different writer, and I have a file with that section name, but it looks like something I wrote, so I don't know if things got reassigned and then the book was reduced in size. It's just too far back for me to recollect every detail. But what I can say here is this What Lies Beneath, I did quite a bit of writing for this particular section. So first, each faction had a What Lies Beneath chapter that covered military, it covered the infrastructure, so industrial capacity, because a lot of factories were destroyed during the Jihad, and then it covered the political situation. So a lot of the house leaders were killed. The Free Worlds League fractured and it was now referred to as the former Free Worlds League. It was simply independent nation states instead of unified under the Eagle banner. And I had the distinct honor of writing the Draconis Combine, so I previously was able to write them, but now I'm writing them in a plot book, okay, because Final Reckoning is a plot book. So here, if you look at what I've got on the screen, this was the opening page. I'm not going to show everything because it's a lot of text, so it'd be pretty dense to put up on the screen. But I'm trying to capture how the internal struggle with the Black Dragon Society was compounded by the external struggle against the Word of Blake and the Ghost Bears, and how that shaped the Draconis Combine mustered soldiery, that's the DCMS, the military of the nation, into what it would be going forward towards the Dark Age. And I wrote all of the sections for the Draconis Combine. I'm only showing the first page here. I also wrote the periphery. So again, it opened with a section about the military, and because the periphery has all these separate minor factions, each section had to be covered. And honestly, I don't remember how I balanced this, if I balanced it by word count or if I just covered what I thought needed to be covered. But what I want to show is that on the later portion of this first section, I gave a pretty good amount of space to the lesser powers, in particular the Franc Reaches, because to me that is, well, it certainly was and remains one of the most interesting parts of the BattleTech universe to write for, because it's so open. Man, open's not the right word. Unrefined. You can write stories that are very much westerns in space, and that appeals to me a lot. I like westerns, I like science fiction, and to me the periphery offers you the best combination of the two. In this, I built on, for each of these, I built upon what I established in Field Report periphery, and also what I would later add to with Objectives periphery, by noting how they increase their military material manufacturing base. I also tried to throw in some for the pirates and for the smaller periphery nations. If I'm not showing it, but on the subsequent page I covered the industrial developments, and then the next page was the political landscape, where I tried to show the disputes between, say, the Taurian Concordat and the Calderon Protectorate that had all been one nation. The Calderon Protectorate seceded. And likewise with the political animosity between the magistracy of Canopus and the Franc Reaches, because the Canopians took Detroit from the Franc Reaches, and that was the only factory world that the Franc Reaches had, so that's why they had to expand their military manufacturing complex to other, perhaps lesser technology. So then I already wrote Draconis Combine and I wrote the periphery. I also wrote the mercenaries. And this allowed me to continue what I had already been working on with, which book was it? Well, it was the Era Report, where I wrote multiple factions. So here I'm doing the same thing, but in a more, let's say, contemporary source, where I basically am collating everything here. But what I really want to highlight is what I had on the later section, and I've actually got it highlighted on the screen here, where under New Faces, so the privations of war meant that some mercenary units were destroyed and others were formed. and some that might have been lower tier ascended and became greater, or came to have greater recognizability and recognition. And so I threw a few names in here. Ganon's Cannons, if you've read Total Chaos, and if you're a longtime fan of BattleTech, you'll know who that is in reference to. That is a unit based on a well-known player whose son was named Ganon. And what I've got highlighted there is Holt's Hilltoppers. Holt's Hilltoppers was my home mercenary unit, created around 2002, maybe 2001, with my friends when I was at Caltech. And we followed the canon storyline for several years until we all graduated and went our separate ways. And the reason I highlight this is the first time I mentioned them in canon. Since I wrote this section, I created a few names. I created the Flying Buttresses, I created Riangemin's Avengers. Foul Tempered sounds like something I created, but I don't remember ever fleshing them out. But this is one of the things I was able to take from my home gaming and work it into canon. And eventually I was able to write a spotlight on Holt's Hilltoppers, which I'll cover eventually. So I made my home mercenary command a canon in-universe mercenary command. They appear in Wars of the Republic era. They occurred in Operational Turning Point's Franc Reaches. I mention at least one mech warrior in one of the technical readouts that is yet to come. So this is something that is not terribly common. They certainly frowned upon such things around this time. I put it in there not knowing if it would stay in there, but the line developer, he basically approved it because I asked him afterwards, and he said, "Yeah, I think he said, yeah, I let it stay." When I saw him at Gen Con, probably the year this came out, and that was probably the highlight of my writing to that point, where I actually, in my view, had an effect on the canon universe. So if you get the opportunity to do something like that, you need to appreciate it. It's one of very few things that I've created entirely from whole cloth that has made it into canon and has stuck around, at least for a little while. So I will talk a little bit more about BattleTech writing later. My voice is still a little raspy. We had a big cold snap. It's 50 degrees colder than it was a day and a half ago. So that's all I have to say for today. Thanks for dropping by. I'll see you next time. And before I go, why not plug my book? Cats of War 2 came out a couple weeks ago. It's doing fairly well in sales. Not as well as I'd like, obviously. I understand people are strapped for cash. It's a rough time right now. But if you need a little escapism, these are military science fiction and military fantasy stories with a feline twist. There's 4 of them, including a brand new Warpiper novella. I hope you'll check it out. And I'll talk to you later. For now, the Doctor is out.